It's the Choke MMA Show. And now your host, Erik Fontanez.
Well, it's another episode of the Choke MMA Show. I am your host, Erik Fontanez, and behind me is just an image of the Choke MMA Show's logo. Simply because we're going audio only for ESK today. He didn't shave, and I just think it's disgusting, and I don't want anybody to see it. That being said, I have a beard. Take that, ESK. ESK, how you doing, man?
I was going to say, that's kind of unfair just because you are able to grow quality facial hair.
I can.
And mine still looks like a 13-year-old boy.
Well, it's because I'm from the Caribbean, you're from Canada, it's science. Also on the show, we have from Bleacher Report, Duane Finley, who has also co-hosted this show one time before, but he's going to be a guest for us today. Duane, what's up, man?
Hey, I'm barely alive, but I'm here and I'm ready to rock and roll with the Fonz and this Canadian schmo that that I've been getting just justice dealt to with on my face-off series. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Well,
you've been getting smacked around.
Yeah, it sounds like you just come from a war zone, but in fact, you just came from a UFC in Indy, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the funny thing is living in you would think that having the fights here and doing the fight week stuff would have been much easier, but I am easily 4 times more exhausted after this circus blowing through town than I've been anywhere else. So yeah, I'm barely alive.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about in terms of the UFC Indy card has actually nothing to do with the card. But I saw a lot of your Facebook posts about you preparing for people to visit you and stay at your place. How many people did you have stay at your place? And were they all fighters, all media, or both, or what?
Yeah, we had, just media cats here, and there was 4 that stayed and then a bunch that blew through. So the way it was set up, the fighter hotel wasn't downtown. It was on the outskirts of the city. So just traveling to anything and then loading up the caravan to haul people around was something entirely unique and painfully inconvenient.
Well, I gotta say, you're a gracious host for letting that amount of people come through your house. I'm sure your wife was happy with that, yeah?
Oh yeah, she was stoked, but she handled it well. The funny thing was, like I put on Facebook, is these cats staying at my house is one thing, but most of these guys don't have kids. I know, Fonz, you have Mini Me and another on the way, so
yes, sir.
They're used to crashing on the floor at these places. But you come to the Finley house, man, you're getting savage, full tilt boogie,
Yep.
and I'll tell you, the one guy who handled the best was MMA Weekly's Jeff Kane. That hillbilly, he's from Kentucky. He's from Kentucky anyway, so he kind of speaks on Savage's level. And those two were like peas in a pod watching SpongeBob early in the morning.
Perfect. And you have a living babysitter. So good for you for bringing in Jeff Kane from MMA Weekly. But let's talk about this fight card because I think that's what people really want to get into. Carlos Condit getting his revenge, getting a win over Martin Kampmann at UFC Fight Night 27. Duane, you were there. How did you see the fight going on live?
I saw a really relaxed Carlos Condit, not in the cage, but in the fight week build-up, man. Condit was just on a different kind of zone, and I asked him about it at the post-fight presser. He really, every fight's important. We all hear fighters say that, but Condit embraced the urgency of the situation. He wants to be a top guy. He wants to be in that championship mix, and he knows that if he'd have lost, to Martin Kampmann, that's a 3rd straight. He's going to be off that radar for the foreseeable future. Condit absolutely embraced it and stepped up, and I don't know if he's looked better. I mean, he was smooth in everything he did. Had a rough first round, but came out and put the works on Kampmann. So yeah, that's the one observation I really took away from that main event, was just how in the zone Condit was.
ESK, did you see the fight going the way it did on Saturday night, or did you anticipate something different?
I anticipated a little bit different. I thought Martin Kampmann would strike a little bit more, just because he's the kind of guy that can get sucked into exchanges. He is really technical with his hands, and I think if you talk to Martin now, and I don't know if Duane got a chance to it at the post fight, he'll probably say that the game plan kind of backfired because all that wrestling in the first round really tired him out, and that's sort of bad news bears when you're facing a guy like Carlos Condit that can go 25 hard minutes at a real high pace. and has so many weapons at his disposal that we saw last night of, the teeps and the spinning strikes and just really technical skills of his own. So I thought it would probably be a little bit more of a technical stand-up affair instead of a one-sided beatdown. But like Duane said, Carlos Condit's a guy that wants to be in that upper echelon and wants to stay there. And this performance absolutely solidified him as sort of like the third guy in that top tier to me in the welterweight division.
Now, obviously, Condit, a top welterweight, gets the win over a game competitor. Where do you guys see him going now with the win over Martin Kampmann in the welterweight division? Duane, I'll start with you, man.
I wanted to touch on what Spencer just kind of said, because I did get to talk to Martin after the fight, and an interesting fact or interesting kind of tidbit is, he's historically such a slow starter that was his game plan, was to go in there and get in on the wrestling quick, to kind of get his engine fired up and get in the fight. And it, as we saw, it ultimately backfired on him. But I do want to say this, and while it was a one-sided beating, hats off to Martin Kampmann, because he admittedly said he had nothing left after that first round, and even 2 seconds before he got knocked out, he was still slinging leather all the way to the bitter end. So hats off to him. But I do see. But I do, onto your question, I'm with Spencer on this one too. I think Condit is right there below St. Pierre and Hendricks. While I highly doubt his win last night will get him, the winner of at 167. It does put him in a really interesting, mix of guys. That's kind of growing a little shorter. I was thinking a Matt Brown fight would be super sexy, but I kind of hear grumblings of that's not the way the UFC is going to go with it. So, right. We're probably going to see, depending on what happens, maybe a winner of Lawler and Rory McDonald. That would make a lot of sense, but he's absolutely right there in that position.
Yes, Kay?
Yeah, I was hoping he took the microphone from John Anik and said, "I hear there's a kid up in Canada that feels I embarrassed him last time. You want to get embarrassed again, buddy?" And just dropped it. Like, CM Punk was there. It was the perfect time to drop a pipe bomb and just, take a shot at Rory McDonald, challenge him back on TV, as Rory did to Carlos back in December.
Right.
That's the fight to me that makes sense. And Carlos talked about it a little bit, both in the cage and post-fight with Ariel Helwani, about he's got those rematches that are out there for him. He wants Johnny Hendricks again. He would take a fight with GSP again, obviously. Rory's in that group. Nick Diaz, if Nick Diaz decides he wants to be a fighter again. I think the really interesting thing from a UFC standpoint, and the thing they're actually going to need to be careful of with Condit, is matching him up against somebody where it doesn't leave the division short of a contender or short of an option if Condit wins. And so I think we'll probably see him. I like the idea of Matt Brown, but again, like Duane said, that doesn't seem to be in the works. The one wild card for me is if Ben Askren comes over.
Yes.
As has been talked about, the Bellator is going to let him go. Mm-hmm. I think that's a fight you make. Carlos Condit is becoming a bigger name. He's been a main event fighter for the last couple of years in the UFC. So he's a guy that's able to pair opposite Askren, who will absolutely talk all kinds of smell. Like, I think Ben Askren's actually a really marketable dude.
Apart from the actual fights, or
but even like his last fight, man, 248 significant strikes to 3. It was an absolute you can sell that fight. You can sell steamrolling. And he's a guy that I think if Bellator does indeed inexplicably let him walk, that's the fight I would like to see. Because you're not going to move Askren right into a title shot. And even beating Condit, you don't necessarily have to put him into a title shot. But if you wanted to and you needed a contender, then that's sort of the go-between.
Nice. Now, real quick, before we move on to UFC 164, because I know Duane's dying to talk about that, I want to ask you guys about Rafael Dos Anjos. What does a win over Donald Cerrone mean for him? Duane?
It's interesting, man. Like is definitely the biggest win of his career last night. But even in the lead up, I don't think half the people there knew, even media-wise, knew who RDA was. Like, oh, we want to talk to Cowboy, and RDA is certainly a game opponent. And solidified himself as, one of the top lightweights in the UFC mix. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens next because, thinking about the TJ Grant factor, people, when TJ Grant got the #1 contendership, people were giving him the who's this TJ Grant guy? RDA is even half that. You know what I mean? Like Grant is like George Clooney, compared to what RDA is holding right now. So it'll be interesting, man. I definitely don't think he's a fight away still. I think maybe 2 at best from getting a shot. But that win over Cerrone will guarantee the next guy he fights will be a legitimate contender. And the thing with when we think about possible matchups. Josh Thompson is he's been floating out there trying to fight everybody. then you certainly could see that happen. One thing I do want to add about last night's press conference, I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch it, but Dana White absolutely brought the chuckles with talking about Vitor Belfort. He said when he got to the podium, he's like, I'm sure right now Vitor Belfort's been blowing me up after every fight saying he wants to fight somebody. He's like, I'm sure right now I got a text saying he wants to fight Carlos Condit. So yeah, on the RDA tip, I don't know where he goes from here, but it's definitely up, and he looked awesome last night.
ESK, what's your take on RDA? Lots of letters there.
Very, very similar to Duane. I mean, obviously getting a win in a co-main event on a televised fight card over a guy like Cowboy that has been in the mix for the last couple of years is really going to do a lot to elevate his profile. But Duane's bang on in that there's under the radar, and then there's where Rafael Dos Anjos was heading into last night in terms of guys that are ranked in the top 10 or the top 15 in the division. I think. Again, as my friend from the great state of Indiana said, he's a couple wins away still, and that division is sort of always pretty fluid and always pretty full and deep with guys sort of 5 through 15 that are competitive, and then a couple guys separating themselves at the top as possible title contenders and challengers. I think a fight with a guy like Jim Miller, I think maybe the winner of the Pat Healy Habib Nurmagomedov fight that's coming up here in a couple of weeks.
It's pronounced Habib.
I'm sorry, my apologies.
It's okay, I'll let it slide.
I think that might be an interesting fight, just as pairing up a couple guys that are sort of knocking on the door of being contenders, but don't have the exposure yet, don't have sort of the big profile wins yet. I have no idea what Nate Diaz is doing. He's a name that's out there.
Nope.
If he's interested, Gray Maynard, Josh Thompson as well. But he needs a couple more wins before he's really in the mix. But he secured himself some main card time going forward, and that's a plus for him.
I spoke to Nate Diaz's manager recently, and he's telling me November he's going to be around for a fight card. So maybe on the GSP Johnny Hendricks card he'll be around. We don't know. That's still up in the air. Obviously, these days, the UFC is going to choose to announce which fight, when they want, what they want, and all that business. So we won't worry about that for right now. But moving on to UFC 164, you got a couple of fights, the co-main event and the main event. In the co, you got Frank Mir versus Josh Barnett. In the main event, you got Benson Henderson defending his lightweight title against Anthony Pettis. I think I'll start with the co-main event. Mir, Barnett, Duane, how you think that's going to go?
I'm excited and worried at the same time because I think that
lots of emotion going on there.
Oh well, yeah, because this is one of those fights that you've wanted to see for so long. The two premier heavyweight grapplers in the sport,
right,
minus Nogueira in that mix, but. It has the potential to be this awesome fight, but it also has the potential to be this horrible situation, So whether we're going to see, two masters of the craft, going after it, or we're going to see a bunch, two big guys hugging in Milwaukee. We don't know, but yeah, I was kind of joking with the UFC PR staff here in India. I asked them about how they're gonna brace the octagon in Milwaukee for all that ego that's in there. So yeah, I think it's a crucial fight for both. On a serious tip, I think it's a very extremely crucial fight for both because for the last 7 years, Frank Mir has never been more than 2 fights out of a title shot, and Josh Barnett's making his return to the octagon 11 years later after sour business. So so I think that the winner absolutely stays in that mix, and the loser, I'm not saying that their job's gone, but they will probably be moved over to the fan-friendly fight column, like Rich Franklin. You know what I mean? Like, oh, okay, well, we're going UFC Pakistan, and
yeah,
and you can headline that card with a Dos Anjos Nurmagomedov co-main event.
Yeah.
So yeah, the winner stays, loser takes a vacation obscurity for a while.
Yeah.
ESK. Go ahead.
The loser gets the loser of the Ben Rothwell Brendan Vera fight at UFC at UFC Dublin 2014, which sounds about right to me. And I think Duane's right. Like, this has all the potential to be a terrific grappling match. 2 really high level dudes. Obviously Frank Mir, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Josh Barnett, tremendous catch wrestling background. It also has a chance to be a horrible kickboxing match. And I'm really frightened for that because both of Josh Barnett at least accepts that my striking is solely a tool to get into wrestling range. I think Frank Mir thinks he's a really good striker. And that could mean we see some ugly striking in this. And I'm not that interested in 2 sort of fringe contender heavyweights kickboxing for 15 minutes. I want to see the grappling. I want to see the submission, attack and defend. I think it's a huge fight for Barnett. I think Frank Mir is a guy that's always going to be a part of the UFC until he decides otherwise. And as Duane said, he'll get moved over into the fan-friendly column to have some, main event and co-main event televised fights and things of that nature. You never know what the situation is with Barnett. I mean, he's been gone wandering the earth as a mercenary for a number of years. And so a poor performance could sour the relationship right away. But if he wins, he's a fresh introduction into the division, which makes it really interesting to me. He hasn't fought most of the top guys in the past. And if he gets through Frank Mir, I think we see some new matchups appear on the horizon that will be really interesting.
So I'm going to ask you guys. Duane, you first. 1-word answer. Who's going to win that fight?
Barnett.
ESK, 1-word answer. Who's going to win?
Ditto.
I don't know who Ditto is, but we'll go with that as a professional pick.
He said Barnett. I'm saying Ditto.
I know. I was just picking on
That's Barnett's cousin, Ditto.
Oh,
yeah.
Makes sense. Moving on to the main event, though. Benson Henderson, Anthony Pettis. Duane, we've seen this fight before, have we not?
We have, sir, but I think this is going to be a little different.
How so?
I really do. If you look at the course that these 2 fighters have traveled, Anthony Pettis is the prime time glitz and glamour that all expectations fall on him being the next wave of mixed martial arts, and in the meantime, while that hype's been being bolstered, Benson Henderson has been on an absolute wrecking spree. You know what I mean? So these 2 men have traveled different paths, and Ben's put 7 wins together in the UFC, and 3 of them being title defenses and winning the championship. So I really think while I kind of chuckle at the UFC promo sometimes, the I got to get the Pettis stain off my soul thing. I'm surprised the Pettis stain hashtag didn't grow to the GSP dark places.
Maybe you could start tweeting it now. Man.
It's a little late to the game, but I really thought people would jump on that. But that's absolutely true. Benson Henderson has been doing remarkable things, and at all this time, this Pettis fight has been hovering over his head. So this is a huge fight for him. But at the same time, on the other side of it, this is show and prove time for Anthony Pettis. He's been hollering that he's the number 1 lightweight in the world for the last 3 years. And what better stage than under the bright lights of the Bradley Center in his own hometown with everything on the line. So if Pettis comes up short in this, we're going to see that train come off the tracks like nobody's business. So it's definitely crucial for both. But I really think that while Pettis has the abilities and the talent to pull off some amazing things, Henderson, the motivation for Henderson is just it's unbelievable there, and his skills have gotten so much better. So yeah, I think we're looking at another 5-round close fight. ESK,
are you picking the same way?
Yeah, I think this has fight of the year potential. I mean, their first fight was one of the best back and forth fights of that year and of the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I would say, punctuated by the ridiculous Showtime kick that is still probably the best move we've seen in high level elite MMA competition.
Absolutely.
At least for my money. I agree with what Duane said though. Like it's got to be a little tough to beat Ben Henderson when you're 7-0 in the UFC. You have that 12 pounds of gold on your shoulder, and yet you have to see the Showtime kick over and over. Mm-hmm. The one thing that everybody talks to you about is, but I thought you didn't win that fight. I thought you didn't win that fight. And Anthony Pettis jumped off the cage and kicked you in the face. So there's a lot at stake for both guys here. Obviously, Pettis, as Duane said, has been making a bunch of noise about his place in the division and I'm coming for my belt and all of that. But Ben needs to put a stamp on a victory as well to sort of silence the critics that are challenging that he always gets through by the skin of his teeth and things like that. I think there's a little extra motivation for Ben to be able to get a victory and avenge that loss in Pettis' backyard would be extra sweet. So I expect it to be 25 minutes of all-out war.
And Duane, let me just double check. Are you going to be in Milwaukee for the fight?
I am. I'm going to be in Milwaukee for the fight. I'm just not going to be there for the fight week. The hoopla with the other things. So I'm coming in on fight day morning and then blowing out of town like the Bob Seger rock star that I am. Shortly after the press duties wrap up. So yes, I will be there to watch Ben Rothwell and Brandon Vera trade leather like two glorified gladiators going for blood.
Yes, and we'll have to follow up with you once those fights are done. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and call the show. I want to go ahead and thank ESK for co-hosting as usual and Duane Finley for coming on and talking fights with us. For the guys I just mentioned, I'm your host, Erik Fontanez. This has been the Choke MMA Show. Peace.